Hi, Alicia. Go ahead, Ethan. I think we're going to start with you.
All right, so welcome everybody. Glad to have everybody back from winter break. Hope everybody had a good one. Today, for our just quick agenda, Jolene's going to kind of talk to us about some of our Ed Club clothing that's being worked on. Talk a little bit about campus beautification and some potential service projects. And then we have a guest speaker from the Grantwood AEA, and she's going to talk to us about what the AEA is and kind of social media and how teachers can utilize it. So Jolene, you want to talk about some of the clothing?
Yes, I would love to. So let me share my screen, show you guys the idea we're thinking of. So you guys can see that all right? All right, so it's sort of like a lighter navy, like a faded navy, I would guess. It says love students first, teach them second. We're really excited about this. I think it's a great saying and it's a great motto. And they will be available in a t-shirt, a long sleeve, and possibly a sweatshirt if I see some interest in it. The t-shirts are looking to be $13 and the long sleeves probably the same or a little bit more. But we will have a store open on MC Screen Printing. If you guys were familiar with what the Kinesthesiology Club did, they had a store open. They were selling some beanies and some blankets. And so we're doing our t-shirts on there so you can order them for your friends, your family, anyone who would like one, and that'll take care of your shipping, your sizing, all of that. So there's no mess. You can have it just delivered to you like a normal package. And yeah, that is all I have about the t-shirts. And I think the next part was the beautification, right?
Yeah, so usually we have like a campus / ECC beautification every year. This year we're not still trying to figure out how we're going to do it with COVID, like protocols and everything. And we know that getting like volunteer hours, which is one of the requirements for Ed Club, is kind of tough. Hard to get into schools with COVID and everything. So we're exploring some different options to get those. So we're currently trying to figure out something to do for beautification once the weather gets a little bit nicer. And we're also exploring some potential options for service projects like mailbox libraries around campus. We don't know whether we would be getting those built somewhere else or building them as a club and painting them, and kind of still trying to figure out what we want to do with those. And the best way to stay up to date with that is just check your email. We'll be sending stuff out as we kind of figure out different projects and plans and stuff. That's about it for that. So while we wait for our guest speaker to get here, she should be here in a few minutes. How was everybody's winter break? What did everybody do? Did you get anything? Have fun? Spend time with family? Do anything fun? I want to hear from some people.
Me and Austin went to Florida.
That's fun. Did you guys go down there for an extended period of time, or did you just like go for a week, or what did you all do down there?
We went for about a week and a half, and we stayed there for Christmas and New Year's and spent time with family, went to SeaWorld.
That must have been nice to have been out of the cold for a week. I wish I could have done that.
Except it was 32 degrees in Florida.
Rosie, how was your Christmas? Not of all. If we don't have you in class, we don't get to see you anymore because you're not with us on campus. You're still muted, Rosie.
I get to see you occasionally, Ethan, even though maybe you're just in body only. Just kidding. Gee, Christmas is really interesting at the Warder House. We are, pretty isolated here in Anamosa, even without COVID. But our daughter had a tonsillectomy. So I played nurse, and we all survived her surgery. And so, yeah, didn't do much else. We just enjoyed each other, and we had ice cream and popsicles for Christmas dinner. And there you go. Thank you for asking.
Faye, did you do anything fun over winter break?
Mine was pretty relaxing at home, just small get-togethers with family, immediate family. I think that's the most important thing over Christmas break is just being able to recharge and spend time with those loved ones that we don't always get to see. So yeah, nothing exciting, Ethan.
I know mine was pretty similar. I just spent time with my family. It was a little different this year, with COVID. Didn't go to a couple family, like big family Christmases that we usually have. We just didn't have them this year, so I didn't get to see some family that usually get to see around this time of year.
While we're waiting for our guest speaker to join us, I did want to share with all of you, if you are student teaching in fall of 21, I'm getting lots of requests for you to go ahead and get your substitute authorization. I'm hopeful that the governor will extend that sub authorization where you can sub in your classrooms while you're student teaching. I know Elizabeth Ramos, she's joining us today. She's a current student teacher. She's been fortunate to get to do some of those opportunities, but you can make a little money while you're student teaching if you have that sub authorization. I see Susan shaking her head yes. But schools have been very thankful that the governor has extended that, and I just think it's important for all of you to think about that as you're beginning to student teach.
Susan, the golf team, as of right now, hasn't been canceled yet, but our plans are right now to go to Oklahoma and Texas for a little golfing trip in the spring. So fingers crossed that still happens. Well, it seems our guest speaker has connected. So everybody, this is Andrea Townsley. She is my cousin. She works for the Grantwood AEA and was a former teacher, and she's all around awesome. So she's going to talk to us today about the AEA and social media for teachers. So Andrea, you should have screen share capabilities. So whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Thanks for that formal invitation to be here to talk with you guys today. I will go ahead and share my screen, and you don't need to see my crazy calendar. So there's what I want to share. I will drop a link to this in the chat just for later reference. If there are any links or ideas or things that you would like to refer back to later on, go ahead and use this for later. All right. How's everybody doing today? Awesome. Looks like a good group of future educators in the room. All right, we're going to start off with just a brief introduction. I'll go ahead and go first. In the chat, will you drop your name, your area of focus, what your personal social media preference is, and then maybe what you use, if you use social media for an educational purpose, put that in the chat as well. Here's mine. I'm an ed leadership student as well as working in education for the last 15 years. I usually use Facebook or Twitter for personal use, and then education, definitely Twitter. So go ahead and drop that in the chat and we will pay attention to that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself just from my background. Let's see. All right, so my name is Andrea Townsley. I, like I said, have been in education for 15 years. So I started off as a fourth grade teacher in a small town and taught for my fourth graders, favorite year ever, for 8 years. And then teacher leadership came into the picture in the state of Iowa. And the school that I worked for was one of the first 39 schools in the state to apply for and receive that teacher leadership and compensation grant. So I was on the planning committee, took out a great leap and applied for one of the positions and ended up being a K-6, so elementary professional development leader at the Benton Community School District for 3 years before jumping off a good cliff after 3 years and applying for the school improvement team at our local AEA, which we'll talk quite a bit about that later as well. I definitely think sometimes being a lifelong learner, that statement is cliche, but I definitely believe that that is super important in today's context because things are ever changing. So I got my undergrad from the University of Northern Iowa. I got my first master's from Graceland University in differentiated instruction, and I am 3 semesters into an ed leadership program to be an administrator at Dordt University. So my preference right now is learning online, which I know you guys are very accustomed to, given the current context in the last 8 to 10 to almost 12 months. So that's a little bit about my educational career. Also, I'm a wife. My husband, Eric, has been in education. He started off as a high school math teacher and then became a principal at a smaller school district, South Tama County, for 5 years, and then was a principal at College Community for 3 years. And then now he is a director of their technology department at College Community and has been in that capacity for the last 3 years. So definitely have a strong educational support system at home. We have 2 kids. Kaiser is my 5th grader. He just turned 11. And Emma is our freshman, and she will be 15. Ooh, that's crazy to say, here in just a couple weeks. So like I said, I've been an instructional coach, a teacher, a professional development leader, school improvement team. I'm really not quite sure what I want to be when I grow up, and that's okay. But I turned 40 this year, so I'm not grown up yet, and I can still enter that capacity as a lifelong learner. So I'm going to go ahead and check out the chat if I can find it as I'm screen sharing for your responses, just to read who's in the room. Let's see, we've got Ethan, elementary education. I know that your instructor, your professor, I've interacted with on Twitter. Please pronounce your name for me.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. Okay, it's always great to make sure that I'm thinking the same. Awesome. I appreciate you guys having me here. So this is exciting. Sydney, elementary education. Rosie, instructor, awesome. Hannah and Austin and Brandy, welcome to our conversation. Andrea, I love the spelling of your name. Macy, lots of elementary education majors. Alicia, Lexi, Elizabeth, I'm seeing a lot of Facebook and Twitter. Bailey, okay, great. Thanks for honoring that to help me read the room to see who's with us. It's much easier when you're standing with someone in a room to be able to read that room, but I appreciate you guys playing along. One thing that I didn't mention, because it really hasn't been on my radar lately, is Iowa Ed Chat moderator. So back in 2016, I got a phone call from one of the previous moderators who was stepping down from moderator capacity and asked if I would be interested. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Iowa Ed Chat, but I was a lurker for a long time and did not type anything. I didn't interact. Actually, I used to make fun of my husband for how much he was on Twitter, and really it shifted, and we did a complete swap of our Twitter use. So I then understood that you could use Twitter to be that lifelong learner. So when COVID hit and everyone was on their computers all day long and into the evening, as educators we know were and still are, we realized that we needed to take kind of a little bit of break. And then we also have been on break since. Iowa Ed Chat is not going away, but we're kind of just taking a breather. I actually just talked to Dan Butler, who's another moderator, yesterday on Voxer Chat, and he said, I think I'm missing it. So we're in the works of seeing how it could come back in some capacity, because we know people do enjoy that platform to interact with other educators, not just in Iowa, but Iowa EdChat was pretty popular across the nation, and then even dabbled a little bit in other areas. So I wanted to touch base with that one because that is something that I still strongly value as an educator. And we will come back to that as well. So I have a very short video. This video has been in several different capacities. Eric Qualman created the first one in 2009, which to me seems like it was just yesterday, but really it was quite some time ago. So I'm gonna go ahead. There is a 2019 or 2020 version. There is a part of it that was not really inappropriate, but just something that I wanted to stick with this one. You can go ahead and Google the social media revolution and watch the updated version. But I'm going to start with this one here. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear it okay. Or there also is an interaction of a no, or you can just go like this if you can't hear it when I start to play. All right. So just a little food for thought. That couple minutes really makes you think when you think of how connected we really are. Part of my objective for you today is to really talk about the potential that social media has. So oftentimes in education, we're taught, stay off of social media. There's too much negativity, or you could get in trouble. So in my opinion, social media is an avenue to be a connected educator. So I'm going to go ahead and let you read this quote by Todd Whitaker, who is one of my favorite educational authors, around being a connected educator, and see how that resonates with you. Nowhere on here does he say that it has to be through social media to be a connected educator. You can be a connected educator in multiple formats. So what I challenge you today during our time together is think about other ways outside of your current platform that you could be connected with other educators. It's awesome to see that you have this group, this community that comes together monthly to talk education, to talk shop. It's kind of like your milk cooler, those of you who are going to be elementary educators, the water cooler, to be able to talk about ways that we can inspire our students. So whether or not it's through social media, I'm going to challenge you that social media can be a way that you can harness that connected educator feeling in a positive way, and your students will benefit. So that's what I'm going to challenge you with during this portion of our conversation, is think about how you define yourself as a connected educator and how you might expand that as well. So a couple words. What is a connected educator? Drop that in the chat. Tons of platforms here: YouTube, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Facebook, Snapchat, reading blogs, Instagram, Twitter, and Voxer. So just in a couple words, like, what does it mean to be a connected educator? Maybe a word social media comes to mind. Maybe Twitter chats comes to mind. Maybe this group comes to mind. But just in a couple words, if you feel comfortable, please drop in the chat what your view is of being a connected educator. So while you do that, I have just a few tips if you are going to use any of these platforms to try and become a more connected educator. So lots of times on Twitter, when you first sign up for an account, you have that egghead. So, right, we want to be viewed as professionals because we are professionals. Put your school picture on there, or put your school logo, put your initials, AT, put that on there, just so people know you're not a robot. You're not trying to hide who you are. Own that identity and be proud of the person that you're going to be online. Just as proud as you're going to be of the person that you are in a classroom, be proud of that identity that you're going to be forming online. So get rid of that egghead. Also, jot a few words down. When you follow someone, everybody wants to know who's joining their tribe, I guess. So whether it's elementary education major or secondary major or future principal or aspiring principal, people want to know that. So put that in your bio line and don't shy away from that. Be proud of that William Penn University grad that you're eventually going to have. So put that in your bio as well. That's part of your identity, and that's part of the ownership that you're going to have as an educator. Oftentimes, I will follow people back if they have a picture and a bio, and I know they're education related. Sometimes there are those robot accounts that I know have nothing to do with education, so I'm not going to give them a follow back. But definitely that's how you expand your audience and the room that we'll talk about on the next slide that you're a part of. It's really important, and I think sometimes that's why social media might get a bad name, especially given the current context of 2020 and the political landscape that we have right now. It's important to be a positive educator. Now, not always sunshine and roses. That's not what life is. But being optimistic and positive is important. Nobody wants to follow or pay attention to someone who's always negative. Now, not saying you can't push back on certain concepts, because that's what learning and growing is about, but trying to do it in a positive and respectful way is super important. Another thing that we'll talk about here in a little bit is a connected educator is somebody who's committed to learning and growing from others, and then as well as inspiring others. So if you choose to use these platforms to become a more connected educator, I'm also going to challenge you to use that to harness that capacity to be a lifelong learner that I've talked about. So I'm going to come up here to the chat and see if we have some additions for what is a connected educator: involved, learning from others, communicating with other educators. I love Twitter as well. Connected to others. Use your connections to grow, yes. Through ideas, make developments, yep. Interactive, open to learning. Sharing ideas with other educators, absolutely. If you're curious to learn different strategies, awesome. We don't know it all, and no one professes to know it all. And this is one room that you can open yourself up to learn from other people. So I love the fact that some of you are already engaged on Twitter. That's exciting. Staying connected to grow together, always learning. Great definitions of a connected educator. And I challenge you to always expand that definition of what that could be. Expand that potential. All right. So I referred to this earlier. This is a quote that I heard early on in my instructional coach time is the smartest person in the room is the room itself. No one professes to know it all, right? Or maybe somebody professes to know it all, but we all know the truth in that is that no one person can know everything. But the room that we're in currently, that's the smartest person in the room, right? So I could learn from Jolene, something that I hadn't thought about, or Aaron. And that is the collective knowledge in the room. If we're willing to respectfully have conversations with each other, push back on each other, agree with each other, disagree with each other in a respectful way, of course. But that room itself is one that I always strive to expand. Twitter and Voxer are ways that I can expand my room so I'm not thinking inside of a vacuum. I follow people who have different views than me, and I also follow people that have similar views than me. And I think that's important to have that professional discourse so you're not always learning inside of a vacuum. This book page right here is from, whoops, sorry about that, is from the book Kids Deserve It. If you have not heard of that, I challenge you to put that on your professional reading list. I read that my first year as an instructional coach. But this page specifically talks about finding your people. Find people that help challenge you to learn and grow. It's going to be very important for you in your first few years as a teacher to find those people that you trust, to learn from, to take advice from, to accept feedback from, and have those conversations that are going to help you continue to grow as an educator. Because when you're not sharing your brilliant ideas, you are doing a disservice to others. We all have things to share. We can't be afraid to share those things, especially when you have found your people. All right, so the social media portion of our conversation is kind of not coming to a close, but I want to talk to you a little bit about my 3 urges for you using that Connected Educator platform. So these are my 3 whys of why I am a connected educator. So 1, I am a connected educator to connect, obviously, with other people, whether it is parents or other educators, principals, aspiring principals, teachers, aspiring teachers. The collective knowledge of that room helps me grow in my capacity as a school improvement consultant. I need different views than just the teachers that I work with or the consultants that I work with. There are a lot of education is so multifaceted that there's so many different views. And now that I'm a parent, I empathize with that parent view in relation to education as well. So connecting to other people. It's important to be a responsible connected educator. Think about the tweets that you tweet, would you want them to be published on the front page of a newspaper, right? Because that happens. And we've all seen the great things that happened last fall with Carson King sharing his Venmo, and that social media wildfire went crazy. And then because of some silly tweets that were several years old, people tried to take that away from him. So really think about what you're tweeting, what you're sharing, what you're posting on Facebook, the pictures you're choosing for your Instagram posts or even your stories, even though they go away in 24 hours. Think about, is this what a responsible and respected educator would post? Because that's what we are. We are professionals, and it's important that you carry yourself that way as well. That respectful and responsible piece is huge if you're choosing to be a connected educator. And that's something that's important to me as well. Something else that I strive for is balance. So when I first became a connected educator where I was actually utilizing the platform, it was something that was really hard for me to manage because I was trying to participate in several ed chats a week, as well as balancing being a mom and a wife and my role as a instructional coach and a professional development leader. It was really hard for me to balance. Up front, try to manage your online and your offline time. It's important for us to, while there are great things that happen on these social media platforms, it's super important to for your social emotional health to manage how often you're online and how often you unplug, while still harnessing that great community, but really aspiring to be someone who has balance. Now, I caution you that balance sometimes implies 50-50. I'm not saying that there's a 50-50 balance in my life with social media and being a mom and being a wife and being a professional educator. That's not possible to balance all of that 50-50, but you really have to feel about that give and take, that you're willing to sacrifice and expose yourself to certain areas of social media. So just try and keep that balance in mind and what that might look like in your current context. And then the last one is committing to professional growth. So there are a lot of things that you can learn online. You can learn a lot of things on TikTok. That's one that I didn't grab that visual, but you can learn so many things on TikTok. It can also be something that's used not to learn. But use some of these platforms, especially if you're trying to own that connected educator for professional growth. Utilize that room that you were putting yourself in to grow and learn from others. People put requests out there all the time for feedback, or do you have a lesson on this? Or how are you teaching your students about equity or social justice? Engage in those conversations or like them so you can refer back to them later. Because those are all important conversations. You can't be in every single conversation, but find the ones that are super important to your context and embrace them and learn from those conversations, because you will grow as a connected educator. All right, I'm going to pause there for just a couple of minutes for some questions. You can go ahead and unmute yourself. This is a very casual conversation. Questions around connected educators, unless you prefer to save all the questions for the end. I do have some slides about my role at the AEA and what AEAs can do for you. So if anybody has a burning question, please feel free to unmute yourself. Otherwise, we do have a question and answer time at the end as well. Don't be shy. I'm practicing wait time, which is difficult in a virtual environment. I don't see anything in the chat yet, and I don't see, just the few that I have access to, I don't see anybody unmuting themselves yet. So gather some questions that you've had from our first 25 minutes together and save some for the end, if you will. But I will go ahead and move on to the next piece that I was asked to talk about. So I'm going to let you go ahead and read this slide. I don't need to read it to you, but go ahead and read this slide. And then I will talk a little bit about the essential functions of Iowa's AEAs. All right, so I want you to picture right now a couple of different school districts. So school A, let's say school A has smaller enrollment. Let's say K-12, they have maybe 1,000 students, right? And then we have a larger school that has maybe 6,000 students, K-12 or PK-12. So those are two drastically different populations of schools. So I'm going to estimate here, and I am not pretending to be an expert in school finance. I haven't quite taken that class yet in my Ed Leadership program, but I will just give you some ish statistics, right? So thinking about the purpose of Iowa's AEAs. So if we get per pupil funding about $7,000 per student. So that's state funding that we get. And that's a hot topic every spring. That's something that we're talking about right now. So let's say it's about $7,000 per student. So that school that has 1,000 kids or even less, K-12, would get about $7 million statewide. And the school that is about 6,000 students would get $42 million. Quite the difference, right? So obviously there's more staff that serves the higher population of students. But I want you to think about this. So property taxes, we get money from that as well. But the pass-through dollars per student help support the things that the agency does. So think about a small school. There are students that need PT support, physical therapy, OT, occupational therapy, speech language pathologists, SLPs, school psychologists, school social workers, behavior coaches, curricular consultants, let's see, audiologists, or like the hearing truck or the vision truck that comes around. That small school, there is no way that they could employ that long list of people that are needed to support certain kids in that school. As well, the higher population of schools also does not have to have those on staff. What the Area Education Agency does is we employ and are able to share services for all of those lists of things that, and there's a slide later on that shows the expansive list of people that help serve schools. But instead of employing those as employees of, a Belle Plaine Community School District, that's a smaller school district. Instead, there are flow-through dollars that Belle Plaine is able to utilize the services through the AEA to share that support with other districts in the agency. So I will talk about the executive functions of the AEA. The first one, accelerate children's learning and development. So we provide those screenings, family support, early access services, academic and behavioral assistance for children, making sure that we offer a free and appropriate public education for children requiring special education services, support for IEPs, and then inspiring educators to sustain superior learning outcomes. So we always want to be better tomorrow than we were yesterday. So we have the capacity to help support teachers, to support educators and administrators, to help inspire their staff to have superior learning outcomes for all kids in their school, not just a subset of kids, all kids in their school. So a couple of different ways that we do that. We provide professional tools. A smaller school or maybe even a larger school wouldn't be able to bring in some national presenters to help all of their staff hear that. So instead, what local AEAs do is they bring in those national presenters. Schools can send a subset, or some schools send an entire school population to hear that. But they don't have to pay that big ticket price to bring in that national presenter. So professional learning opportunities at your local AEA are huge. Now, given the current context, it's been much less in 2020 and the start of 2021, but we're trying to switch some things to virtual to still meet that need that educators have. And then also, to provide schools with innovation to maximize effectiveness and resources. Every AEA across the entire state has expansive tools and resources, whether it's books or videos or technology devices to share. So oftentimes you can check out certain devices like the what's the super exciting new goggles that came out. So schools might not have access to buy a set of those for their school, but you can check out kits for the virtual reality goggles that you might not have access to in other ways. So always check if there's a professional resource that you want to read. There's an expansive professional resource library as well as resources for our students as well. So if you're unfamiliar with what is an AEA, so the state of Iowa is divided into 9 different AEAs. So this one right here, Grantwood AEA, is the one that I'm a part of. Let's see. This one has a better view of looking at the public versus non-public schools and total enrollment. So I'll just give you a minute to look at that. and see maybe where, which AEA you most closely affiliate with, if any. But I'll let you take a look at that slide first. One thing that I forgot to mention is actually, I'm just going to drop it in the chat before we're finished. So all of these visuals come from a guide called the AEA Playbook. So I will make sure to drop that in the chat so you know where some of these are coming from. So the data sources are coming from, especially this one right here. So this just gives you a snapshot of the services, some of the services that are provided. So you might think of IEPs as just something that happens when a kid might be in kindergarten through high school. But really the AEAs help support early access for birth to age 3. And then we also support ages 3 through 5 for IEPs and children ages 5 to 21. So even after graduation, those numbers are there. Total full-time teachers that are supported from our AEAs, total full-time principals, as well as total full-time superintendents. I believe this data is from the 18-19 school year, so it's a little bit older, but it gives you the context of what we're talking about when we talk about Iowa's AEAs. So total enrollment in public and non-public schools that are served, 519,112 students provided services. Total number of Iowa public school districts, 327, and total number of accredited non-public schools, 182. All right, so I did reference this slide prior when I was listing off, when I was having you think about those two different schools, this slide of what different services are provided. So you see that there are 3 lanes: special education, educational services, as well as media services. Now I will tell you that probably 80% of our budget at the AEA level is focused on that first column for special education services for schools. So it kind of puts you a little bit into perspective. I think Grantwood AEA has 530 some employees. An overwhelming majority of them provide special education services that are listed in that first column. I'll let you just keep taking a look at that. All right, this next slide is kind of a culmination of what we've talked about. It's just about a minute or so video about, did you know all the things that our AEAs do? And then I'm going to go ahead and ask for questions from the group. I know we have about 10 minutes left after this video is over with. So jot down some questions that you have. And then if we don't get to all the questions, I'm sure Ethan can shoot those to me and I can respond to them and he can share them with you. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. Did you know what AEAs can do for you as an educator?
Iowa's area education agencies have been here for nearly 5 generations of our state students. To make sure everyone in our state, from birth through age 21, has access to the highest quality education. Together with local schools and families, Iowa's AEAs make sure students have access to resources that most schools couldn't afford on their own. Like virtual reality glasses, physical therapists, and all kinds of awesome learning opportunities for our teachers. Awesome! Iowa's AEAs are also providing local schools with a set of new tools to identify struggling students faster, get them help sooner, and prevent them from falling behind. They also want to make sure every student who graduates is ready for college or a career. How are they doing that? By partnering with our local schools to offer the latest research, teaching practices, and all kinds of cool new materials our teachers can use every day. They also have some pretty smart experts who work with our teachers to make sure they have everything they need to help us. Did you know they did all that? I bet you didn't. Iowa's area education agencies, our partner in education for over 40 years. Learn more about how your local area education agency is supporting students in your school district at www.iowaAEA.org.
Oops. Oh my goodness. All right. So it's your turn to share questions. If you feel comfortable putting them in the chat, you can do so. Or you can also unmute, take a risk, ask a question. What's rumbling around in your heads right now?
What do you think is like the best social media for connecting with other teachers? I know you're really big on Twitter, so I don't know if you think it's that or Facebook, or what do you think is the easiest to connect with like other educators and learn from them?
Great question. So I think you always have to think about what your purpose is for connecting. So if your purpose is to connect on, I need to know more about standards-based grading, there are some awesome Facebook groups for specific purposes around standards-based grading. So that might be my go-to for standards-based grading. If I want to know more about growth mindset and I want to use the Learner Lab resources. So he used to be called Trey Ugly. If you guys are unfamiliar with Trevor Reagan's work, he's phenomenal. But what I do there is I connect via podcast to listen to his podcasts. And I also connect to his website to watch videos, to read articles, to learn from him. He also has a presence on Twitter, but I would say I learn more from him in my car driving around to different schools through his podcasts. So I guess, Ethan, that's not really an answer to your question. It's really about thinking about your purpose first. If you want to know more about just education in general and who you can follow, EdChats might be your option on Twitter. Or thinking about who do you like to read about, what education, educational guru, follow them, figure out who they're interacting with, and follow, expand your network that way. So I guess my answer is not clear cut. It's basically think about your purpose. But if I had to say one, Twitter, but just creating a Twitter account is not going to make you a connected educator. You have to think about your purpose.
Okay, I'm not from Iowa, so I've never really heard of the AEA. Is that just an Iowa thing, or do other states have that?
So that's a great question, Lexi. So Iowa's area education agencies, that's how Iowa has it set up. They're called different things in different states. So I know Minnesota, for instance, has a parallel system, but they're not called that. And then there are some states that don't have those flow through dollars that go toward AEAs to provide the services that we're able to provide. So thanks for bringing that up, because this is kind of a Iowa context of services provided in Iowa. There are some parallel services in other states, but I'm most familiar with the one that's set up in the state of Iowa. Good question. Thank you.
Hey,
I have a
Andrea.
question.
Hey, Aaron, you go first, and then the next can come right after Aaron. Thank you.
Wanted to see how you best draw the line between like encouraging social media and it becoming a problem. Just because for me, I see, like I had a conversation with one of my classes and about their screen time, and I had them share their screen time if they were willing of their phone, and it was alarming.
Mhm.
like seriously alarming to me. And maybe I'm starting to become the old grumpy guy, but like, I mean, I just think of my son and stuff, and I see a lot of, especially like boys and stuff, like with like video games and just social media, cell phones, like, and I totally get your message, and I'm a big supporter of like connecting with as educators on social media. But I just know for me, social media is a concern going forward, and almost like a problem for some youth. How do you draw and kind of walk that fine line of,
Yep, I think that's a great question. And I think that's something that is continuing to come up in the landscape that we're in. More people are spending all day connected to meetings. So like you're going to spend all day on a Zoom meeting, and then you're going to go and watch 4 hours of Netflix and look at Twitter and listen to podcasts. Like, it's all around us, right? So where do you draw that line in the sand? And my urging is it needs to be a line that's flexible based on your current context. The best thing that I did as an educator, and it took me a long time to do it, was turn off all of my notifications for Facebook, for Twitter, for my email. That was hard for me, super hard for me, and set aside specific times to look at those notifications. So it doesn't constantly bombard me with, hey, somebody's trying to interact with you. And I get to choose when I look at those notifications. Now, do I sometimes pick my phone up and look at notifications regardless? Yes, absolutely. But I have drawn that line that I'm not going to let the notifications on my phone drive what I do. So Aaron, you bring up a great point, but that's kind of like an agreement with yourself that you're not going to let this tool take over your life. Especially with our current context and how literally connected we are virtually, you have to draw that line in the sand somehow. And if it's one thing that I think could be super powerful is chart out what that weekly screen time report is. Are you doing better today than you did yesterday? Make it a goal. Go through that process. Like, here's my current reality. Here's what I want to get it down to. Some days you might be online more. Like my kids today are home with a snow day. I know they're going to be online more than what we usually would recommend. That's just something I have to deal with, and make that line be something that's flexible. It's about balance. I wouldn't suggest a firm line that's not movable. I hope that made sense.
I guess I had a question on what would you say is like the best, it's been like a new trend to like share what you're doing in your classroom with like your parents or guardians. Do you have any good platforms for that and any like tips to do it? Just like
That's a
very well done.
Great question. And I could probably talk for another hour on that. Parents trust when they know what's going on in the classroom. And the way that you could easily do that is set up a blog. You could have the blog be public if you have releases from every parent, to have it be a public site, which means that you could share and learn from grow from other educators as well. Or you could create a private site where you are sharing pictures of what's going on in the classroom via a blog. You could also do this via Seesaw or Schoology to share photos of what's going on in your classroom. But I'm so glad you brought that up, Jolene. I recommend, yes, please share what's going on in your classroom, because if you don't share what's going on in your classroom, people get conclusions of what they don't know. So put it out there, put it up front, celebrate successes, celebrate how you're learning and growing, celebrate how you're failing and learning from it. And don't use the crutch of, oh, I can't share. Find ways that align with your school district's policies to be able to let those parents and the community inside your classroom in some capacity. So recommendation, Seesaw is a great platform that's free. Using your own blog, setting up a Google site, those are all great ways. I started out with just emailing my parents every day, this was way back in like 2007, email all of my parents that had access to email every day, a picture or two, and then here's what we did today. It's a conversation starter for those that are still able to have dinner together at a table. Kids are less likely to respond to the question, what'd you do today at school? Instead, hey, I saw a picture of a guest speaker you had that was Karen the naturalist that came in and talked to your classroom. Tell me about the bear skin that I saw in that picture. Which one do you think is going to elicit more conversation? So great question, Jolene, and I could probably talk about that for another hour.
I guess I have another follow-up question. Unless anybody else has a question, go ahead. My follow-up question was, is there anything in your experience or that you would know of, like, to be weary of when you're trying to set that up, or just like in general, anything to be cautious of?
Yeah, I think it's always important to understand what your district policies are around social media sharing. You always should follow your district protocol first. Sometimes with things in education, I would say it's better to ask for forgiveness later, but in our current context, that is not something that I would recommend. I would make sure you're following your district protocols and processes around sharing, and then also make sure your parents are upfront. You're upfront with your parents of what it is you're trying to accomplish. Help those parents understand your why. If your school also has a current policy against any sharing, come up with some talking points and talk to your principal or your superintendent about what your reasoning is behind wanting to share, because it's always easier once people know your why to bend on some of those policies that have always been around. That's how we've always done it, to kind of move that needle forward to help garner that support and celebration from families and community members.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, that brings us to 12 o'clock. So I know some people have some 12:15 classes. So Andrea, thank you so much for coming and talking to us today. If anybody has any burning questions they just need answered, you can email me and I can get them to her and I can get an answer for you. But besides that, again, Andrea, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Yeah, I will also put the link there on a slide after that question slide that I shared earlier with my contact information, as well as the link to that AEA playbook. So you have that at your fingertips. I appreciate you guys taking time to learn with me today, and I will see you online.
All right, everybody else, that concludes for today. Our next meeting is February 23rd, I believe. I think I have the date right. So it'll be February 23rd. So just stay tuned to your email for more information on like the meeting, where it's going to be at, and what we might be doing. So yeah, everybody, hope you all have a great day. Thanks for coming.